The goal of this show is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. And we do that every single week by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. We also post news you need to know about advertising every day on our LinkedIn. You should follow us there. Today, we're joined by Tony Hawk, pro skateboarding icon, brand builder, video game pioneer, and now co-founder and chairman of the board at Decal, which is an agency that's flipping the traditional model on its head with subculture at its core. Alongside him this episode is Adam Wilson, co-founder of Decal and a strategic force with over 2 decades leading creative shops and at brands like Carhartt, Jeep, and Disney. He's a thinker, he's a builder, and he's a bit of a hat hoarder. So we're going to learn all about Decal, which is an agency that refuses to be just another indie shop. We talk about subcultures and how they beat demographics, how creators are the new competition, and how to build a creative ecosystem that punches through the noise by actually listening to the people you're talking to. Tony is going to drop some wisdom on relevance, reinvention, and what advertising can learn from skateboarding. Adam's going to bring that strategic clarity to this episode, the team structure without any silos, and why brands need to start thinking outside the PowerPoint. So welcome. You're going to learn a lot about breaking in, about thriving in advertising this episode from Tony Hawk himself, the GOAT. We hope you enjoy. Thank you all for following us on LinkedIn so we can get those impressions, so we can continue to get GOATs on this show. We're excited. We can't wait. Now let's kick it. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right. Tony Hawk and Adam Wilson, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you both today to learn more about Decal and more about the agency and what you're all up to and any advice you have for the next generation. How does that sound, gentlemen?
Sounds great.
I'm in. Thank you.
Rock and roll. So, rock and roll. So Tony and Adam, can you each introduce yourselves in the realm of advertising and share your role at Decal? We will start with Adam. How does that sound?
That sounds good. Co-founder of Decal. Prior to Decal, I've been kind of all over. A bit of a Forrest Gump experience with the industry I both love and hate. It's a healthy balance. Was at Carhartt for a while, running brand marketing there. I was at McGarry Bowen in Chicago. And my role or my title here has been all kinds of things and probably will continue to be, which is sort of the nature of a small business, I suppose. Tony.
Got it. Tony, how about you, sir?
Well, I'm Tony Hawk, pro skateboarder, and my role in the past has been mostly the subject of some campaigns and advertising and marketing. And in this scenario, I'm more of a consultant, an investor, and also sometimes the featured the featured subject of some of the advertising. But it's been really refreshing to be behind the scenes in this way, because in the past I was only on the receiving end of an agency's wishes or direction, and it was a battle. And so I feel like in this way I can come from the other side and make it a better experience for both parties.
Got it. So for you, Tony, then what do you think advertising needs to learn from skateboarding, that culture in general?
That Renegade is good, and that we need to shake up the traditions. Skateboarding has always been very much about a rebellious spirit, street culture, and advertising, I would say 20, 30 years ago, was not prepared to be in that realm or to represent it well. And I think that, there has been there's been a lot of learning in that sense. Obviously, skateboarding is much bigger and much more prominent than it used to be back then. And advertisers should take note and be much more flexible. But in terms of what we do, I mean, we're much more efficient, and we are much more renegade on our approach. And I would say, these punk ethos are hard to shake. So as we progress, we still hold dear to doing things in a different way and celebrating that.
Yeah, that punk spirit. Yeah, I've seen some agencies kind of represent that or try to, but that authenticity is so important where it could be sniffed out. And I'm curious then, what sparked the idea for this agency? Like, what problem were you guys trying to solve in the industry specifically? How'd you guys come together?
Yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount to unpack there. I mean, a lot of this goes back to just my I've had a fairly unique experience in the business in that I've been at big agencies. I've run a brand, so I can tell you that, the problem that most small agencies say they are solving is the easy part. That is, we're small, we're efficient, we're nimble, we're transparent. Like, we can all do that, especially when you have lower overhead and all of that stuff. So bigness and inefficiency isn't the entire problem that we, set out to solve. I saw culture very quickly moving into, we hear a lot about the attention economy, and it's a very real thing, which, it means that it's not owned by brands anymore. It's owned by creators. Creators are the competition, and so the hypothesis was, can we build an agency-like thing that isn't a walled garden, has fewer agency people, believe it or not, an entity that's like intrinsically plugged in, with people who understand brands and culture, many of which who've never worked a day at an agency. So, and then how does that operationally and functionally work, and what is it? So, in other words, it was like, okay, we'll be independent, but we're not going to come up with a funny name and stand up a Squarespace site and then just call ourselves, small yet mighty. I mean, we've used those terms before. It's just digging a little deeper. And Tony was, really at the top of that list. Skateboarding is it's a small family. It's a little bit like a kid who grew up with LeBron James being there, or Jordan being, who plays basketball, being their hero, but you're only like 1 or 2 degrees separated. Tony's wonderful wife, Kathy, is from Detroit. I don't want to put words in Tony's mouth, but he's taken an interest in Detroit, and so we bumped into one another, and I had the opportunity to kind of tell him this idea, and the more we talked about it, the more I'm like, oh, that's right. You've been exposed to agencies, you've worked with brands, and you're seeing the same problems I'm seeing. And maybe we're just using different terminology. So from there, it felt right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tony, anything to add on that?
Sure. Well, I think Adam's leaving out a crucial detail in that when we did actually connect, it was through some mutual friends and Detroit, obviously, but he invited me and my skate team to ride a backyard pool just outside of Detroit with permission, which is just unheard of. And we were actually in the middle of shooting one of our new skate videos, so we got some really good footage from there. We ended up connecting after that, and yes, talking about marketing and advertising because he lived in that world. And the next thing I knew, I got an email from Adam that was a press release announcing a new venture between us for an agency. And obviously, I was a little taken aback. But then as I read through it and started thinking about it, I thought this is a great idea. So it was the most unique approach to starting a company I've ever seen.
Okay.
And we had the right support, we had the right partnerships, and I did feel like Detroit and California are both epicenters of very specific subcultures that resonate. And Detroit is, Detroit hustles. Detroit versus everybody.
Do you know, I eventually had to develop a proper business plan, and make it through Tony's very savvy sister. So
okay. So the sister's got some business acumen, Tony.
Absolutely. Well, she was my business manager and partner for a long time. She's retired since, and we're onward.
Got it. So you wrote up the draft press release, Adam. You're like, this is the vision. It wasn't like released to the public yet, correct?
No. Yeah, totally.
It was a proposal on its own right. So it had better not be released to the public. Yeah.
Well, a press release has to have everything in it that you want to say, and so it forces you to really winnow it down to the crux of the idea.
Yes, it's like the old PR headline concepting tactic that Vygotsky and all that. Yeah, that's like a classic.
Yeah.
Cool. So this subcultures, this is kind of like a pivotal point of what you guys are all about. You believe subcultures are more powerful than demographics. First, we need to understand what the heck is a subculture, and we know the traditional demographics is like age, like where you live, how like how much you make, like education levels. So what's a subculture? Teach me this.
What?
Go ahead, Tony.
That's a loaded question. I think it's a passion for sure. There's a central activity or very specific subject to a subculture. For instance, skateboarding. It was when I was a kid, the outcasts and the misfits were mostly drawn to it because it was something that was creative. It was something that had daredevil aspects, but it was also something very inclusive and didn't require a practice regimen, didn't require a coach. You didn't have to join a league. You just had a skateboard and you were in the club. And in those days, especially in those days, you were identified as such. It was a very specific look, a very specific approach to life. And so when you understand how important that was to people's formative years, you can understand other subcultures in that sense, where it's like, oh, they chose this. I mean, I have an example is one of my sons is a musician, and he is a hyper pop musician.
Hyperpop.
And when I see the world, and if you haven't heard of that, you probably will, but when I see the world of hyperpop, it reminds me of early days of skateboarding, where they have a very specific genre of music that they've created, that they covet. And yes, outsiders are welcome, but that's not the point.
Yep. Yeah. Whether it's like gardening or hip hop or JDM, like I'm a 51-year-old dude who always wanted a WRX, and I finally, maybe it's a midlife crisis thing, finally got one. It's all tuned and all that stuff. But what Reddits am I on now? Like I am in there. I'm in it because I'm coalescing. But here's the thing: it transcends age, gender, household income, all of that stuff, right? And so that's what we mean by subcultures are greater than demographics. And I just also want to make sure, like, before I dig into the nerdy stuff here, because it gets a little nerdy. It's not that we're going to Scott's I like to wear our clients.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Scott's, for example, new client of ours, it's lawn care. This isn't a one-to-one where it's like, hey, we know everything there is about skateboarding or punk music or, whatever subculture you name it. And we're just going to make ads for you through that lens. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is brand leaders are drowning. And I know this because I was one for a while. And this is that empathy that we have for brand leaders. They are literally drowning in more consumer data, first-party data than ever before. They are drowning in marketing technology options. The pendulum has swung hard to, programmatic and all of that stuff. They know more about their audiences, but they don't really know them. And I'll give you, they're kind of stuck in this swirl of grouping their audiences based on demographics, household income, all that stuff. And sometimes like when you get a persona slide, I'm sure you've seen these in
Mhm.
briefs, right? It's like, here's their interests and passions. And under it, it's like they index high. The MRI data says they index high for social media use. And it's like, no shit. Like we all do. Who doesn't?
Right.
So, Vitel did this study recently. 88% of Gen X down to Gen Y are actively participating in some kind of subculture. In other words, like there are there are interesting people and they have real interests that transcend their demographic profile. So we've got this thing. We ended up naming it after some clients were like, you should probably name that. It's called the sub method. And what that all we're really doing is we're taking existing audience segmentation from our clients. We're not telling them they need to start over like some agencies do because they want a 6-month strategy project. In less than 8 weeks, we dig into those audience segments, and we find the subcultures that are most prevalent. And they're always there. There's always at least 2 or 3 existing subcultures within an audience. So in the case of Scots, they had 2 segments. We dug in, and when you talk to people, and the first thing you want to talk to them about is, like in the lawn care segment, start with yoga. Talk to them about that. It's like old fashioned, back in the day, touching grass, one-on-one interviews. The biggest difference is we're not starting with, what do you put on your lawn?
Mm-hmm.
Starting with what they really care about. It's crazy what you want to learn more about your guitar. And these are real too, by the way. Like with Gibson, you want to learn more about your guitar audience. Turns out there's a lot of preppers in there,
Mm-hmm.
like prepper culture. It's
Yeah.
weird, but they get excited about talking about that stuff. So
Got it.
yeah.
So digging through, identifying multiple subcultures within those traditional demographics and that data, what like subcultures are you guys finding yourselves interested in right now? Like if you went through your algorithms, what would be popping up? What do you guys fall into, would you say? You mentioned your son Tony's hyperpop.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I'm so fixated and focused on skateboarding and advocating for skate parks. So that's mostly still where I'm at. But
Yeah.
I love that it has gotten the reach for skateboarding is so much bigger now. And I wouldn't say there is a demographic exactly for skateboarding. Like if you were to go to a park right now, and shockingly, there is probably one near you, and there's one near me right now. When I was a kid, there were 3 in the U.S. And if you go to one of those, you'll see people of all ages, all races, all genders, all skill levels. I mean, you'll have a top pro mixing it up with an absolute beginner, and everyone's supporting each other. If someone's trying to learn something new, the rest of the people there will rally around them to encourage them. And I don't see any sport activity or anything like that. And I feel like to see it come that far, and to still be able to participate and to be able to have a voice in it, I think is amazing. So I guess my answer is I don't really have the bandwidth for much else when I'm looking at what's going on, because this is so much bigger than we ever imagined it to be.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Adam, what's yours right now? You got a couple?
Well, I mentioned the JDM thing, right? There's a new one for me, and I don't know if it's age or what, but gardening. I'm like literally growing little seedlings for my garden in my basement under grow lights and maybe some other things, but just it's fascinating. Like, and that's the cool thing about subcultures, and I think they're all they're all structurally very similar. There's no singular owner, right? And what's funny is we've identified 6 archetypes within any subculture. You could take hip hop, set it next to gardening, set it next to JDM, set it next to keto and clean eating and tiny houses and steampunk if you want. There's always there's always the newbie. There's always the purist who doesn't want anything to change. They're often the loudest in social media. So, understanding how they're structured, how they work, allows us to go in and find those people. And as I was mentioning earlier, it's crazy how much you learn about that audience. In the case of Scott's, for example, we learned that people were more, and it surprised even our Scots. I mean, they own the category. I don't know what the percentage is, but they own the category. And so they know their audiences. There's 6 of them, I believe. So we learned that those folks aren't the people for this new brand. They are not the lawn care perfectionist. They're not the dude who's like edging the driveway perfectly, and when his kids want to break out the slip and slide, he has a mild heart attack. We're talking about the people who are like, yes, hell yes, break out the slip and slide. We'll throw some dish soap on it, and my grass might get yellow underneath. They're the same people that if they walk into Costco, like at Sprint, like right about now, they're going to walk past all the bags of fertilizer and grass seed because the outdoor trellis with the bistro lights caught their attention. We call them outward expanders, and there's another subset. So through those one-on-one conversations, and by the way, we find them through this combination of some AI and social listening to really figure out what those subcultures are that are within that existing audience, and then we go find the loudest among them, the most engaged among them, and those are the people we interview. And sometimes they do journaling, whatever it is, but it all leads to, quite frankly, it leads to creative briefs that it feels like we're cheating, because the picture that we paint of this consumer is in such high fidelity. And in the work that we recently launched against that strategy, it feels like nothing else in the category. It's speaking directly to these people, and we wouldn't have known that had we not started where we started.
Yeah, that clarity is so crucial. And then I was curious on like how the process works in general, aside from identifying the subcultures and briefing there. Like, what is the team structure like? Are there any new types of roles within this agency? Just the foundational, like, how does it work after you identify those subcultures?
Are you asking just how the agency works in general, or are you talking more about this process?
Let's go with like the process then. Like, you identify the subcultures. Who are some of the teams now? Like, where does it go to? How does it come to execution?
Yeah, so it always results in a brief. We try to keep our briefs brief, and it's generally centered around that insight that we've dug up through the sub method. In terms of like, how we work, we refuse to build departments. Think of it more like we work in pods, small pods, with, really experienced people, subject matter experts. We tend to look for multi-hyphenates who, are comfortable talking about strategy. But the key difference is that group is iterating from the very beginning. There isn't this waterfall approach where you're waiting for the brand planner to come down from on high with their picture deck, and then all of a sudden it's handed off to the creatives. It's super iterative, very collaborative, and very transparent. In fact, I mean, I don't want to undersell us to freelancers, because we rely heavily on freelancers. There have been some freelancers who have been a little weirded out by how collaborative we are. They're so used to just being off, and then they come, in the black box, and then they show up with their work to pitch it. Yeah, that's one thing. I mean, I know overall a lot of this is driven by, a shared approach. And, I think Tony could attest to this. It's really about the best ideas generally don't come from inside a walled garden. Like, we built this place for it to be second nature to reach outside the agency. And that's just normal for Tony, like that it felt new for us to try to build it and operationalize it. And Tony's often just like, yeah, well, why would you do it any differently?
Yeah.
I think, through my experience too, I've been on plenty of campaigns and shoots where the agency is there, the studio is there, there's 12 people looking at a monitor, and everyone has to justify their job there. So everyone has some input, and the whole thing takes twice as long. I mean, even up to a couple of years ago, I'm not going to say who, but I did a shoot with a big client, and we didn't get to every shot on the actual storyboard because there were so many people involved giving their opinions. And we were shooting this and shooting that and changing lights. And at some point, there was one very crucial shot that I knew we needed to get just in terms of hardcore skating aspect. And I kind of threw my weight around, and I forced this director to shoot this one thing, because I just said, look, this has to be in there. Whatever else you're missing we'll figure it out, but this one has to be in there. And I actually made them shoot one extra take of it. And of course they used it, and it was one of the main part of it. But what I'm saying is that's just still such an old school approach. And how we're doing it is much more nimble, much more efficient. And I mean, for instance, we just shot this Scott's social media piece in 2 mornings. And it was all kind of, it was definitely DIY, but it was just from my own creation, and my collaborator, and no one stood in our way. And I think it's probably one of the coolest things we've done.
Yeah. Gino, it's interesting because Tony just mentioned 2 things there in the past couple of years. He has a very unique sort of position in that he pursues his own things as Tony Hawk, right? So he'll be in things with and work with other agencies, even though he's part of this one. And so that's an interesting. We get a little bit of intel that way of like, some validation that the way other agencies and or brands are operating. So Tony's kind of our mole that way.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, you see what you like, what you don't like. You take those notes, bring it back to decal, and like improve on it. So that's interesting. I want to know about now.
By the way, there are some things he's done with other brands and other agencies where we're like, damn it, I wish we could have done that because it was so good.
Yeah. Hey, that's good though. I mean, you have the taste, and you keep on iterating. But I'm curious then, what role does the cultural advisory board play in all this, and the creator network play in shaping work that you guys have at Decal? Whoever wants to take that one first.
Sure.
I would throw that one to Adam, but I think that we've curated an insane group of creators and artists and musicians and skaters, athletes, whatever else you want to call them, to call upon for consulting.
Yeah. I mean, that's as good of an answer as I would probably give. I can add a little color. I mean, I will say, this probably is, I think, we're the only agency that has this advisory board of quote unquote agency outsiders. So, like, I won't go through the whole list, but like people like Paul Blair, right? He won a Grammy. He's an internationally recognized DJ. But mostly the guy behind the gal. He's won a Grammy being a producer for Lady Gaga. So like he really understands music. Doesn't matter what genre. He really understands the subcultures and within subcultures around music. So having people like him on our board gives us the credibility to have operationalized a different kind of strategic approach. You can't go around, using the word subculture this, subculture that, unless you can back it up. And so, and Tony represents kind of the tip of the iceberg of this advisory board. and we use them in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's Rolodex driven. Who do you know?
Mhm.
Um, you know, I could give you a bunch of examples of that, but I don't think we have time. Um, Sometimes it's in the creative development. Sometimes it's just looking at a brief that we've developed before we send it to a client. Really great at calling bullshit on things, because they all have a sliver of equity in decal. So and they get to go just
Mhm.
do their thing and do what they do. So it's a pretty interesting group, and some of them, including Tony, are just really good creatives. Tony's a hell of a copywriter. Um,
Okay.
so
Nice. I like that. I think I'm curious then, for each of you, what are some of the brands you think Decal would absolutely crush if you had them as a client? Like, who do you want to work with? Give me the rundown there.
this is the you're gonna hate this answer. Because you're really, I think you're really hoping for an actual, us to name names. Like, it truly, any marketing leader who just wants to break out of that, you know, traditional demographic driven stewardship of their brand. It could be any category. Um, I think Scott's, I know we've talked a lot about this, but like, it's lawn care, it's seed and fertilizer on people's lawns. And we just gravitate to those things as long as they check that box. They want to break out of buying their audiences mainly through demographic driven planning and positioning and creative development. If you want a vibe, if you want to build some enduring relevance for a brand, like authentically, I know people throw that word around too, but I'm going to use it here. Like, that's who we pair well with. Yeah, that's primarily it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah, it would be impossible for me to name specific brands or companies too, just because I live in this unique space where I do have endorsements that are outside of what we do at Decal, and I don't want to ruffle any
That's fair.
feathers in that sense, but
Yeah.
we're open to any challenge, and I feel like we can rise to the occasion.
Hell yeah. Hell
You
yeah.
would think, Gino, you would think by this point, given our great understanding of action sports culture to begin with, we would have worked with a Burton, which would be a dream for me. Um, or Vans, or any number of these. But generally speaking, the action sports category, you know, doesn't doesn't have nearly the budgets, even the big ones, that you might find in other categories, and they often have really great internal groups that live and breathe the culture,
Yeah.
that they're doing just fine without us, if
That's
I'm
fair.
being perfectly honest.
There's a
Yeah.
saying in skateboarding: "Core is poor."
Got it. Got it. Love it, gentlemen. Let's get into some advice. Is that okay? I think I want to ask you guys, for the next generation, for anybody listening out here, this will be helpful, and you can say whatever you'd like. But I want to start with Tony. Like, at a point when skateboarding might have hit a low, you kept going. You edited videos. You built your brand. You stayed close to culture. What did that chapter in your life teach you? And what advice would you give someone trying to break into branding or creative work today?
Well, that's a lot. I think it taught me that I love skateboarding so much that I would just do it regardless of getting paid for it or not, and that is central to my approach to life, to my identity, and I was willing to do it even at risk of my own health, and even at risk to my own finances. Because it's who I am. So if I had any lesson from that to pass on, it's just to follow your passion, because I think living the dream is doing what you love. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the most financially viable or successful thing to do, but if you love what you're doing, then that's what it's all about. That might be a little ethereal or lofty, but I feel like it's true. And if you do end up being successful, all the better. That's just more icing on the cake. But and if you are, if it's truly something that is draining, you economically, then you've got to find a balance. And that's what I did. With skateboarding. In the early 90s, I edited videos on the side because I had a system that I could use, and I was happy to do so. I ended up being a consultant on a couple of Hollywood shoots because I was 25 at the time, and that was considered too old to be the featured skateboarder in whatever we were doing. And so I ended up being the sort of go-to for angles, for shots, for what's possible. I was the stunt double in a lot of ways for the actual principal young skater. And it wasn't that I took that as an insult. That's what I had to do to hustle. That's what I had to do to stay in skateboarding because I loved it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's like you found the passion. You would do anything it takes to continue that, and that is skateboarding. And you did that. But you might have also learned some of that branding and that creative work, editing those videos. And I guess like throughout like your career, there's probably been so many different types of brand opportunities, endorsements, and you've probably said no to a lot. Like how would you define your brand today and like going forward in this next chapter of your life?
Well, my brand is central to skateboarding, skateboarding culture, skate park advocacy. Strange twist of fate. I've been doing a lot of speaking gigs over the last 5-10 years, quite regularly. In more, I do more of those than I do actual skateboard exhibitions or appearances. Mm-hmm. But at my age, that's probably a better option, and that's been really fun because I'm able to share the journey of how I even got here, but also to explain how authenticity was core to all of this, including marketing, including video games, including doing a nonprofit. And so that's been really enlightening to be able to do that. But I think that, what can I say? The reason that I am able to still be considered relevant is because I walk the walk, because I'm still skating.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Adam, what advice would you say to someone in advertising who wants to break out and start something of their own? Because like you're doing it now. I mean, I did it with this little media entity, and it's tough. So I'm going to be listening heavily here as well. Like for anybody to start their own thing, what do you have to say to them?
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me, how to break into the business, for young folks
that too.
Well, I mean, I could just give a quick thing on that. If you're young, if you're early in your career in advertising, specifically on the creative side, I guess my biggest piece of advice to you would be question the strategy, question the brief, and learn the process by which briefs are developed. That that will create branches of the tree of places you can move up and get into. And if that's not your cup of tea, if you really don't care, because on that spectrum, right, there's the more sort of strategic creative people, and then there's the finishers, right, the executioners. Oftentimes those folks I don't even care what the brief says. I just want to make it look fucking awesome. Right. And that's great. And those people can rise up through the ranks and end up making a lot more money and all that. But if you really understand strategy and become a strategist yourself, it's going to pay dividends. It's going to open doors. If you are a little further along in your journey, and you want to start something, I would say you look around at what everyone's saying. I mean, I said at the top of this, right? Every small indie agency is saying we're small yet mighty. You gotta find a differentiator. So go solve a real problem and be clear about it. I love Partyland's positioning, and it's super simple. It's like, why isn't advertising funny anymore and entertaining? Like, that's what they do, right? So pick your thing, don't double down, triple down on it, and hammer away at it, and use the same sort of perseverance and maniacal focus that Tony described. Like, because that's why this guy inspires us all the time. He works at it to this very day, and walks the walk. So if you're going to do something, solve a problem and walk the walk as much as possible.
Love it. Well, gentlemen, if there are any brands or potential hires, potential employees that want to reach out to you, Decal, and you, Adam, what's the best way to do that to learn more about the agency?
It's at DCAL agency is our handle on the media's social.
Nice.
Yeah. Or you can shoot us an email.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Did I miss anything? Anything else you guys want to chop it up about the agency?
No, I think you.
No, I appreciate the time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, all right. Well, best of luck. I'm going to be watching. I'm really excited. Tony, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a dream.
Thank you.
You guys keep doing what you're doing. You're making it a lot more fun.
Thanks.
Ad age and ad week, take notice. This is how it's done. So.
That's what I'm talking about. Appreciate you, sir.